Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
I'm excited to be back.
Me too. I love these deep dives.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun.
So today we're going to be talking about Keystone habits.
Oh, Keystone habits. Those are important.
Yeah, and they're super interesting.
Hey,
And we're going to be looking at Keystone habits through the lens of Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit. Have you read that one?
oh, yeah. The Power of Habit is a classic.
Uh,
It's such a good book.
it is. It's really interesting. So we're going to be focusing on chapter 4 specifically. And, in this chapter, Duhigg shares some fascinating stories about how these small changes, these keystone habits, can lead to some really big results.
Yeah, and that's what's so cool about Keystone habits, right?
Right.
They're not these huge, overwhelming changes. They're these small shifts that can make a huge difference.
Exactly. They're like these little levers that can create this ripple effect across your whole life.
There's a domino effect.
Totally.
You knock over one domino and then boom, the rest fall into place.
I love that analogy.
So are you ready to dive in?
I am. So, one of the stories that really stood out to me in this chapter is the story of Alcoa.
Alcoa.
Yeah, the aluminum company of America, back in like the 1980s.
Oh, yeah. I think I remember reading about this one. They were struggling back then, right?
They were. It was 1987, and the company was kind of in a rough spot. And they brought in this new CEO, Paul O'Neill, and everyone's like, okay, what's this guy going to do? Investors were expecting him to come in and talk about, profits and all the typical business stuff.
Right, the bottom line.
Yeah. But instead, O'Neill gets up and starts talking about worker safety.
Worker safety. That's kind of unexpected for a CEO.
It was. I mean, everyone was pretty surprised. Some investors were even like, wait, did we hire the wrong guy?
They must have been thinking, what does worker safety have to do with profits?
Right, exactly. They probably thought he was a little bit out there.
Maybe like a crazy hippie or something.
Yeah, something like that.
But here's the thing. O'Neill was actually onto something pretty brilliant.
He was. So he basically said, we're going to make Alcoa the safest company in America.
And how did that go over?
Well, at first people were skeptical, obviously. They're like, how is this going to help our bottom line?
Yeah, it seems kind of counterintuitive.
It does. But O'Neill was convinced that focusing on worker safety would actually lead to all these other positive changes within the company. He saw it as this keystone habit, this one thing that would kind of unlock everything else.
Interesting. So how did it actually play out?
Well, the results were pretty amazing. Alcoa's profits actually soared to record highs.
Really?
Yeah, and they became one of the safest companies in the world, like way safer than anyone thought possible.
Wow. So O'Neill's crazy idea actually worked.
It did, and I bet those investors who were initially skeptical were pretty happy in the end.
I bet they were.
Yeah.
So how did focusing on safety lead to all these improvements?
Well, O'Neill recognized that in order to achieve zero injuries, every single aspect of the company needed to be examined and improved.
Right, so it wasn't just about putting up some safety posters and calling it a day.
No, it was much deeper than that. It was about scrutinizing their communication practices, making sure everything was running efficiently, and even empowering workers to take ownership of their safety.
That makes sense.
So, for example, Duhigg tells this story about a worker who noticed a potential safety hazard on the production line. And in the old Alcoa, this worker might have just kept quiet or been afraid to speak up. But under O'Neill, this worker actually shut down the entire production line because they were concerned about safety.
Wow, that's pretty bold.
It is. But instead of getting in trouble, this worker was actually praised for their actions. Like they were a hero.
So it really created a culture shift.
Totally. It changed the whole mindset of the company. And it makes you wonder, what are the safety equivalents in other fields? Like, what's the one small change that could create these kinds of positive adaptations in education or healthcare or government?
That's such a great question. And you know what? It leads us to another really important idea from Duhigg's book, the concept of small wins.
Small wins.
Yeah, these are basically small but significant victories that can create this incredible momentum.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So Duhigg argues that it's not always about making these massive sweeping changes all at once. Sometimes it's about finding these small, achievable steps that can ultimately lead to these huge transformations.
Okay, so like baby steps toward a bigger goal.
Exactly. And you know what? One of the best examples of this is, believe it or not, a story about the American Library Association and their fight for gay rights.
The American Library Association and gay rights.
I know, it sounds kind of random,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually a really powerful story about how even a seemingly insignificant win can snowball into something much bigger.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me everything.
All right, so back in the early 1970s, Gay rights organizations were having a really tough time gaining any kind of traction.
Yeah, that was a pretty different time.
It was. But there was this group, the American Library Association's Task Force on Gay Liberation,
Okay.
and they managed to score this small victory. They convinced the Library of Congress to reclassify books about the gay liberation movement.
Reclassify? What do you mean?
So these books were originally categorized under this heading that was considered, pretty offensive. And the task force was like, no, this isn't right. So they advocated for these books to be moved to a more neutral category.
Huh. So it was like a categorization thing.
Exactly. And on the surface, it seems like a pretty small change, right? Like, who really cares how books are organized?
Right.
But this recategorization, it was actually huge. It was this symbolic victory that really energized gay rights groups.
Interesting.
It led to more fundraising, more political activism, and it kind of helped shift public perception, even if just a little bit. And that paved the way for some bigger wins down the road, like the American Psychiatric Association, removing homosexuality from its list of mental disorders.
Wow, so this small win with book categorization actually contributed to a major shift in how we think about sexuality.
Exactly. And, it really highlights the power of small wins.
It really does. It's like that saying, big things often have small beginnings, or something like that.
You got it. And speaking of small wins leading to big things, it makes me think about Michael Phelps,
Michael Phelps, like the Olympic swimmer.
the one and only. He's obviously an incredibly talented athlete, but his success also really highlights the importance of developing specific mental habits.
Okay, I'm ready to hear about Michael Phelps. He's amazing. I mean, what made him such a phenomenal athlete? Was it just about rigorous training, or was there something more to it?
Well, there's no doubt that Phelps had natural talent and put in countless hours of training.
Right.
But his coach, Bob Bowman, was really smart. He recognized that mental habits were just as important as physical training.
Oh, interesting. So what kind of mental habits did Bowman instill in Phelps?
One of the most interesting ones was this mental routine they called the videotape routine.
Videotape routine. What's that?
It wasn't an actual videotape, but it was like this carefully crafted mental visualization of the perfect race.
Okay.
Bowman would tell Phelps to watch the videotape every night before bed and every morning when he woke up.
Wow, so he was basically practicing the race in his mind.
Exactly. Phelps would imagine every single detail of the race. His strokes, his turns, the feel of the water, everything. He basically pre-programmed his brain for success by repeatedly rehearsing victory in his mind.
So he was training his mind to win even before he got in the pool.
Exactly. And it's amazing how powerful that can be.
So did this mental rehearsal actually play a role in any of his major wins?
Oh, absolutely. There's this incredible story from the 2008 Beijing Olympics that really highlights the power of this mental training.
Okay, what happened?
So during the 200-meter butterfly final, Phelps had a major setback. His goggles started leaking. Yeah, it was bad. By the last lap, he was basically swimming blind.
Swimming blind. In the Olympic finals? That's terrifying.
I know, right? For most swimmers, that would have been a disaster.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
But Phelps had trained his mind to stay calm and execute his plan, even when things went wrong.
So what happened? Did he win?
Not only did he win the gold medal, but he also set a new world record.
Are you serious? That's unbelievable.
It's a testament to the power of mental habits. He'd watched the videotape so many times that he could swim the race perfectly, even without being able to see.
Wow, that's just incredible. So it wasn't just about physical strength and training. It was about preparing his mind to succeed.
Exactly.
That's so powerful. It makes me wonder if there's something like the videotape that people in other fields could use.
That's an interesting thought.
Like, could a surgeon visualize a complex procedure, or could a musician mentally rehearse a difficult performance?
I think you're onto something there. While the specifics might differ, I think the underlying principle of mental rehearsal can definitely be applied to a wide range of fields.
That's pretty amazing to think about. So we've seen how focusing on worker safety can transform a company, and how mental rehearsal can lead to Olympic gold. What other insights does Duhigg offer about these powerful Keystone habits? It's interesting thinking about these Keystone habits.
That's on your mind.
It seems like they're more than just like isolated actions,
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's like they create this kind of framework for success that influences all these other habits and routines.
That's a really good way to put it.
Like if we go back to the Alcoa example,
Yeah.
it wasn't just about O'Neill saying, hey, let's be safe.
Right.
It was about creating this whole culture where every detail mattered.
Yeah, and you know what's fascinating about that?
But,
That attention to detail, it led to some pretty surprising outcomes.
like what?
Well, for example, their focus on collecting and analyzing all this data about worker safety.
Hmm.
It kind of inadvertently led them to create one of the first global corporate email systems.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So they were trying to prevent workplace accidents and ended up revolutionizing communication. Pretty much. Okay, I gotta hear this story. How did that happen?
Well, they needed a way to, quickly share all these safety reports and suggestions across the entire company.
Right, yeah.
So they decided to invest in this new technology,
Oh.
email. And as employees started using email to talk about safety,
Mhm.
they realized, hey, we can use this for everything.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, they started using it to communicate about sales figures, production issues, you name it.
So their focus on safety actually gave them a technological edge.
It did. It's a perfect example of how a keystone habit can have these unintended but awesome consequences. Like you start focusing on one thing, and it creates this domino effect of positive changes in all these other areas.
I love that, the domino effect of positive change. So it's not just about the initial habit, it's about the chain reaction it sets off.
Exactly. And it's not just about systems and technology either.
Oh, okay.
It's about the cultural shift that keystone habits can create.
Like how?
Well, remember the story about Robert Barton, that Alcoa executive?
Oh, yeah, vaguely. Remind me?
He was a super high-performing executive,
Oh,
but he got fired. And it wasn't because of some major catastrophe or scandal.
okay.
It was actually a pretty minor incident where some workers got exposed to fumes.
Okay.
But the problem wasn't the incident itself. It was that Barton didn't report it,
Oh, he tried to sweep it under the rug.
pretty much. And that went against the whole culture of transparency and accountability that O'Neill had worked so hard to create.
Right, safety first, no matter what.
Yeah. And by firing Barton, O'Neill sent a crystal clear message.
What message?
Safety was non-negotiable. Nobody was above the rules, no matter how successful or important they were.
It's like actions speak louder than words kind of thing.
Totally. It showed that he was serious about safety and that everyone was held to the same standard.
That must have had a huge impact on the company culture.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It reinforced the idea that safety was everyone's responsibility, from the newest employee to the top executives.
I like that. So these keystone habits, they're not just about changing individual behavior.
Sure.
It's about shaping the values and behaviors of an entire organization.
You got it. And, it makes you think about the unspoken rules that shape our own lives and workplaces. Like, what are the things that everyone just knows, but nobody really talks about? Are those rules helping us, or are they holding us back?
That's a really good point. So how do we apply this concept of keystone habits to our own lives? It seems like all these examples are about big companies and CEOs.
Right.
Is there hope for the rest of us who aren't running Fortune 500 companies?
Of course, that's the beauty of keystone habits.
Yeah.
They're not limited to just, large organizations.
Okay.
They can be applied to all sorts of groups, even individuals.
So like me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think back to that study on weight loss that we mentioned earlier.
Okay. Yeah.
Just the simple act of keeping a food journal, once it became a habit, led people to make healthier choices without anyone telling them to.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Right. It's like the act of journaling itself created this structure and awareness that helped them make better decisions.
So it's like you're holding yourself accountable just by tracking what you eat.
Yeah, pretty much.
Interesting. So what are some other examples of these small actions that can spark big changes?
Oh, there are tons. In his book, Duhigg talks about how different organizations have used keystone habits really effectively.
Like what?
For example, IBM, under Lou Gerstner, focused on transforming their research and selling routines.
Oh, okay.
And McKinsey, they built this whole culture of continuous improvement through something they call rigorous internal critiques.
Rigorous internal critiques.
Yeah, basically they were constantly evaluating and improving their work.
Got it. So IBM focused on their core processes, McKinsey on constant evaluation.
Yeah. And then there's Goldman Sachs.
What did they do?
They made risk assessment a central part of everything they did.
Interesting.
Before any big deal, they'd analyze the potential downsides and figure out ways to minimize those risks.
So being cautious is their keystone habit.
In a way, yeah, it became a core part of their culture, and it's a big reason for their success.
It seems like each of these companies, even though they're in totally different industries, they found success by identifying these keystone habits that aligned with their goals.
Exactly. And that's the key takeaway here.
What is?
It's not about the specific action itself. It's about finding those small but impactful changes that create that ripple effect.
Right, like finding the right domino to knock over.
You got it. And it doesn't just apply to the business world either.
Oh, okay.
Duhigg also talks about how these concepts can be used for personal growth.
Tell me more about that.
Well, he mentions this study of West Point cadets.
West Point, like the military academy.
Yep. And the researchers found that one of the biggest predictors of success wasn't their grades or physical abilities.
Okay.
It was this quality called grit.
Grit, like resilience.
Exactly, that ability to stick with things even when they get tough.
Yeah, grit is super important for achieving long-term goals. But how does this relate to Keystone habits?
Well, they discovered that grit often came from the culture that the cadets created for themselves.
Interesting.
And certain Keystone habits helped create that culture.
Like what?
For instance, some cadets had this habit of meeting every day with a small group of friends,
Oh, okay.
just to support each other and stay motivated. And this simple act of connecting with a supportive community,
Yeah.
it became a keystone habit that helped them develop that resilience they needed to succeed at West Point.
So it's not just about individual actions, it's about finding those habits that create a support system.
That's exactly it. And it makes me think back to that Alcoa example where the plant manager got rid of assigned parking spots.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That was interesting.
That small change, it's in a powerful message about company culture.
It did. Like, everyone's equal here.
Right. It created a sense of fairness and camaraderie, which definitely contributed to their success.
I see that. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Keystone habits, I think the big takeaway is that small changes can make a huge impact.
They can.
But it's about finding those right levers, the actions that set off that chain reaction across our lives.
Exactly.
It reminds me of that saying, what is it? What starts here changes the world.
Ooh, I like that.
It's a good one, right?
It is. And it highlights how important it is to be intentional about the habits we cultivate. Instead of trying to change everything at once, maybe focus on identifying those key habits that can spark all those positive changes.
So how do we actually find our own Keystone habits? Where do we even start?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
It starts with, a little bit of introspection.
Introspection.
Yeah, like thinking about your goals, your values, the things that are important to you,
Okay.
and the systems that shape your behavior. Like you could ask yourself, what's stopping me from getting where I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
Or what's one small change I could make that would have a big impact on my life?
So it's about figuring out what works for you, not just copying what someone else does.
Exactly. It's got to be personal.
Right, right. And once you figure out that Keystone habit, what then?
Well, then you can start building systems and routines that support that habit.
Okay, so like if my Keystone habit is to exercise every morning,
Mm.
I need to make sure I have my workout clothes ready, set my alarm, maybe find a workout buddy.
Exactly. You got to set yourself up for success.
That makes sense. But, it still feels a little overwhelming. Like, how do we even know where to start?
Well, I think a good place to begin is just by looking at your daily routines.
Okay.
The things you do every day, the structures that shape your life.
So, like, my morning routine, how I organize my work, even how I interact with people.
Exactly. Could tweaking one of those things create a ripple effect?
So maybe instead of scrolling through my phone first thing in the morning,
Yeah,
I could spend 15 minutes reading or meditating.
that's a great example. Or maybe you commit to going for a walk every day after lunch.
Okay, yeah, I could see that working.
It's not about overhauling your entire life overnight. It's about finding those small, strategic changes that can make a big difference.
Right, those small hinges that swing big doors. I love that idea.
And don't be afraid to experiment,
Oh, yeah.
What works for one person might not work for another.
Sure.
You might try something and be like, nah, this isn't it.
It's all about trial and error.
Exactly. It's a journey, not a destination.
That's such a good point. This whole conversation has been so insightful. I feel like I'm walking away with a whole new perspective on, how small changes can actually lead to big transformations.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
It really is about finding those keystone habits, those small changes that can unlock a world of possibilities.
It's kind of empowering, actually.
It is. So I want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
Think about the habits that shape your daily life, both at work and at home.
Mm-hmm.
If you could change just one, which one would have the biggest positive impact on your life?
That's a great question for everyone to consider.
It is. And maybe even think about what small win you could aim for this week, something that could get you started on that path toward a bigger goal.
I love that. So, everyone listening, take a moment to really think about that. What's your keystone habit? What small change can you make today to create those ripples of positive change in your life? And remember, even the smallest actions can lead to amazing results. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time.